Let's talk about the pop culture tragedy that is the 1950s housewife and the way the legacy is now being used to indoctrinate younger generations. I have long said there are a lot of parallels between Gen Z and the 1950s housewife generation. For reference, 1950s housewives would have been born during or slightly after World War I, would have seen women get the right to vote as young girls, would have come of age during the Great Depression, and been young adults during World War II. These women's lives had been deprived of luxury and stability, so by the time the 1950s rolled around with its promise of prosperity and beautiful illustrations, and the fact that dresses could have yards and yards of fabric to make those voluminous skirts, because fabric no longer needed to be rationed, they jumped at the chance and fell in line. Gen Z has also lived through great turmoil, upheaval, and doing without. Right now, those same beautiful cartoon images are floating around and being shown to young women who are buying into the American dream that never existed. Why I call the 1950s housewife a pop culture tragedy is because conservatives tend to deify them, and liberals, specifically some feminists, tend to vilify them, as opposed to vilifying the men that created the situation that required them to become subservient. Photographs of fictional characters like June Cleaver from Leave It to Beaver are used to highlight how perfect and subservient these women were. But if you actually watched Leave It to Beaver, you would see that June is also a feminist, just living in the time she is dealt. Right now, the number one way for Gen Z to obtain financial stability is to marry money. That is a sad reality. A lot of young women do not understand the historical context. The fact that these women in the 1950s could not own credit cards in their name, could not have bank accounts in their name, in some states could be committed to mental institutions and lobotomized because their husband deemed them to be crazy. It's no secret that women's rights are under attack in this country, and that the far right is doing everything in their power to get women back into the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant, with no other options. If you're watching this, I want to remind you, the 1950s looked pretty, but it wasn't safe for women.